Dark Mother Scream is the Siberian dance. Cry from prison, or yell for help. Or perhaps God has another word for it. Ominous little green Dark Mother Scream. Dark Mother Scream is the original mother of languages. It is silly to trust the mind, silly to argue against it. Prognosticating by computers, we leave out Dark Mother Scream. The teachers can't handle Dark Mother Scream. That's why Lermontov is untranslatable. When the storm sang in Yellow Buga, what did it say to her? Dark Mother Scream. Meanwhile, go on dancing. Drunker and drunker. Shagadam Magadam Dark Mother Scream. Don't forget, Rome fell, not having grasped the phrase. Dark Mother Scream. Dark Mother Scream. Dark Mother Scream.
In 1861, a book appeared in Basel. It was called Das Mutterrecht, and through its obscure pages it proposed a controversial yet groundbreaking theory that all human cultures, and long before they developed the patriarchal structures we know of today, began as matriarchies. Its author was a Swiss antiquarian and professor of law, Johann Jacob Bachofen, and his book was aptly named Mother Right, in reference to what he believed was the original social contract of early human cultures, while special importance was placed on the Greek island of Crete as a potential host for such a culture. His theories were and have remained controversial, but in the summer of 1900, a British archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, unearthed in Crete the Palace of Knossos, and with it, an entire civilization that appeared to have flourished more than 2,000 years before the Parthenon was built on the hills of ancient Athens. A world that had thus far existed only as legend. What impressed Evans as he searched through the palatial ruins was the presence of numerous figurines representing a female deity, one whose overt sexuality stood in contrast to the warrior virgins of the Olympian pantheon, while the total absence of a male counterpart, one that could represent the goddess husband, convinced Evans that he had reached the heart of a Mother Right type culture. Sir Evans named his new discovery Minoan civilization and began to write extensively about the life that he imagined could have once flourished in Crete, a peaceful abode of priest-kings and slim-waisted youth, playing freely in nature, of sacred groves and dark caves where a great mother goddess was worshipped long before Zeus came thundering down his mountains. Following his death, many of these theories would be challenged, with some believing that Evans had invented as much as discovered his new culture. Yet, as recent evidence has shown, the Minoans of Crete were not the first to worship in the name of the mother, but possibly the last, as before them had existed an entire complex of cultures springing out of the fertile crescent of the Near East, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers provided the cradle for the first agricultural revolution. Together with this change in food production came a new religion, one that focused on the eternal cycles of life and death and the four seasons that marked the passing of time, the harvesting and the sowing, around which a great mother goddess stood supreme and out of whose bosoms life came springing forth. Throughout Greek legends, one can hear echoes of what might have been rituals of human sacrifice that predated the classical Greeks. And archaeologists now believe that some evidence can actually be found in Crete. Only 100 meters from Evan's palace, archaeologists discovered a mass of children's bones that bore marks of deliberate knife cuts, like parts of their skin was ritually removed after they have died. For us, this dual image of a great mother that gives life abundantly only to feed on the blood of sacrificial victims is nothing but a contradiction. But back in the world of the great goddess, it simply represented the eternal cycle of life and death, where each new life feeds from the old, a cycle that never stops turning, thus inevitably leading to rebirth, as something that happened once has no reason for not happening again. Only that by the time that Evans began his excavations in the summer of 1900, cultures like the one he uncovered in Crete were nothing but a legend. Because for some reason, and despite her powers, the world of the great goddess that once spread unbroken from Mesopotamia to Ireland was lost in history, to such an extent, no less, that few believe it had ever existed. So, what happened? Well, we did. Because most of you listening from either Europe, America, or the Middle East are probably descended from either of two great tribal groups that, around the time of the second millennium BC, invaded the world of the great goddess on two fronts, squeezing it like a pinch until it collapsed somewhere around the 12th century before Christ. The first, the Indo-Europeans, who came down in waves out of the Eurasian steppes, while the other, the Semitic tribes that emerged out of the desert. These were not patient toilers of the earth, but nomad warriors who in time tamed the wild horse and camel and used it to overrun an area that spread from Germany to Ceylon. They were people of the battle axe and war chariot who brought the cults of the thunder god, Zeus for the Greeks, Wotan for the Germans. Well, through the Hebrew Bible and in either Christian, Muslim or Jewish variety, this god became our God, Yahweh. But what if the goddess is making a return? In the past decade alone, the Western world seems to be undergoing a very deep cultural change and away from what it considered its patriarchal origins. Newspapers throughout Europe and the United States are almost entirely preoccupied with gender issues and homosexuality, while social justice movements spring up and merge into one another, combining feminism with ecology. Notice how the green movements and climate change activists constantly present the Earth as a mother to be rescued. Save the Earth has been their rallying cry, and it has made such a headway into our consciousness that we fail to see the irony. It's not the Earth who is in danger due to climate change. It's us. As even in the worst of predictions, the Earth will go on living after we perish. So what is really going on there? Modern conservatives have rushed to classify the green movements as communist subversion. And while it's true that most of the policies proposed by green parties across Europe can only happen through huge government spending, which are caused by taxation, the spiritual aspect of these movements is far from being Marxist. Because Marxism, an ideology that caused the death of millions, was nonetheless, at least in principle, humanist. Because according to Marx, man is the pinnacle of creation, the measure of everything. In his works, man and beyond him, mankind, takes the center stage, while nature is virtually absent from his works. But the green movements turned this Marxist model on its head. Scientist Alexander King, founder of the Club of Rome, one of the key players in the Green Agenda, wrote that the common enemy of humanity is man himself. In Marx, man is to reach his completion when the working class takes over the means of production. But for the environmentalists, it's not the ownership, but the existence of these industrial tools that is the problem. It's the Industrial Revolution itself, hailed by Marx as the apex of human progress, that is identified by the Greens as responsible for the destruction of our planet. And it's only through rolling back some of that progress, an unthinkable premise for Marx, that we might have a chance for salvation. In short, if man-produced CO2 is the problem, then man is the problem and must be dealt with, or perhaps sacrificed. Through and through, the new environmental movement is not Marxist, but Minoan. It's a cult of the earth goddess who feeds on the lifeblood of young men, men who are now forced to pay increasing taxation for green energy plants that have rarely, if ever, been proven to work. Men who are told to have no children, so that Gaia can go on. Back in ancient Rome, Catullus mentions how the Gallor, the priests of the dark goddess Cybele, performed acts of ritual self-castration in her honor, and cross-dressing rituals were found across the Mediterranean. Could we be witnessing a revival of these sacred rites? But what am I saying? None of this makes any sense to the modern mind that seems to believe that anything that can't be reduced to atoms and natural forces can ever be said to exist. But as the poet said in the beginning of our episode, it is silly to trust the mind, silly to argue against it. Meanwhile, we go on dancing, drunker and drunker. But never forget, Rome fell, not having grasped the phrase. Dark mother scream,